bottom line is the White House was lying, not only to the press, not only to the public, but they were lying to members of their own cabinet. They were lying to White House staffers. They were lying to Democratic members of Congress, to donors about how bad things had gotten.
So I feel like this is a story that's not nearly being talked about enough. It's being widely ignored by the mainstream media, and they like to do this thing where anytime there's like a negative story about Joe Biden, they like to just turn it all on Trump and put full attention on Trump, which, I mean, they talk about Trump a lot anyway, but they do it especially in times like this. So Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson, two reporters, one works for CNN, one works for Axios, came out with a new book talking about the cover-up of Joe Biden's mental decline. Now, a lot of us already had a theory that this was a thing. We saw it in real time. We saw how he talked, how he walked, how he spoke. And the media and the Democrats tried to gaslight us for years, saying that he's perfectly fine. It's just a right-wing conspiracy theory. But now in this new book, they interviewed over 200 Democrats and advisors who before the election would not say one thing about it, but now the election's over, they're coming out and saying all these different things. It's all true. And we're going to dive into that here. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment on the video, and let's jump right in. So first one by Axios right here. Biden aides discuss wheelchair use if he were to be re-elected. So this so the book is Original Sin, President Biden's Decline, its cover-up, and his disastrous choice to run again. Joe Biden's physical deterioration was so severe in 2023 and 2024 that advisors privately discussed the possibility he need a wheelchair if he won re-election. Biden's physical deterioration, most apparent in his halting walk, had become so severe, it's a wheelchair, blah, blah, blah. Given Biden's age, also privately that said that if he had another bad fall, a wheelchair might be necessary for what could be a difficult recovery. This is crazy. This was covered up. They were literally going to see, this is why they were going to wait till after the election, like they say in here, because if they put him in a wheelchair before the election, he wouldn't have gotten votes. He probably would have won a few like California, Maryland, a few blue states, but he would have gotten destroyed in the election. So if you put him in a wheelchair, because that just shows how bad his age is getting to him. Like at the end of the day, he's getting old. He shouldn't be running for president. So they weren't going to do that. There's another one here. Biden didn't recognize George Clooney at fundraiser. So when he's known George Clooney for 20 plus years, and when he went up to him, his aide had to clarify that it's George Clooney's right here. George Clooney, the aide had to clarify before after seeing obvious Biden hadn't realized which George, and then he said, "Oh yeah." Now you guys might think, "Oh, this is stupid," blah blah blah. It's just George Clooney. Who cares? But I mean, if you've known someone for 20 plus years, you should be able to recognize them. You know, that's a huge sign of mental decline. Rusty Biden napped during debate prep while advisors hoped he'd be a game day performer. So it says right here, Biden advisors, you guys remember a week before the election where he went to Camp David and hid from the world? We basically had no president that week. Well, a lot of his administration, we didn't have a president. But he basically hid from the world because he needed prep for this debate with Donald Trump. Well, apparently he didn't do that much prepping. So this says, former White House Chief of Staff Ron Klain was disappointed in Biden's preparation for the CNN debate. Quote, he'd been assured that Biden had been reviewing his prep materials before he arrived at Camp David, but he didn't. He was rusty and exhausted when he arrived, essentially sleeping that whole first day and even after taking lots of naps. In the mock debates, the authors write Biden's performance ranged from bad to passable. Passable's as high as it got. His voice was hard to hear, his delivery was halting, and his answers were all over the place. Advisors told him his mouth was agape when he wasn't speaking and urged him to close it. His voice got raspier as the week went on to the point that aides couldn't hear him during mock sessions. Biden kept asking for more cough drops. See, this is where it gets interesting. So it said at some point, President developed a cold. So they used that as a reason for why his debate was so bad. In reality, it was just his mental, it was just in steep decline. He just wasn't mentally there. And then they came out with this huge article. I'm not going to read all into this. So this is where this whole story is like I believe all the Biden stuff. But now they start to basically blame Biden dropping out so late to why Kamala Harris lost. And there's many reasons why Kamala Harris lost. And I think that actually hurt her, the fact that I think he dropped out too soon. Like, I think he should have dropped out later to help her. But this is how Joe Biden handed the presidency to Donald Trump. At a faithful event last summer, Barack Obama, George Clooney, and others were stunned by Biden's weakness and confusion. Why did he and his advisors decide to conceal his condition from the public in his campaign for re-election? So this is where advisors reveal how Biden totally effed Kamala Harris's 2024 chances. A senior advisor in Barack Obama's White House was quoted describing Harris's 107-day campaign sprint against former and future President Donald Trump as a effing nightmare. And it's all Biden. He totally effed us. See, this is crazy. Because if you look at this is why I don't believe this stuff. So this is Kamala Harris's favorability rating. So if you look at this, so when they first took office, January 2021, you see favorability 47, gets as high as 50, and then around July that year, it becomes unfavorable. So just in 6 months, the Biden administration, Kamala Harris becomes unfavorable. And then she's unfavorable this whole time because she doesn't really do anything. She's barely even there. Nobody even knows what she does. And then around this time, so this is the debate around June 28th. And then July 13th when Trump got shot. And then like a week after that, they announced that Biden was dropping out. And then all of a sudden, look at this. She just shoots up in favorability because she's the candidate now for whatever reason. She's the most unpopular vice president ever, but apparently she's good enough to be actual president. Makes no sense. So this is like what they call the honeymoon
First
phase.
one I talked to President Biden,
I don't know why that started playing. This is called like the honeymoon phase, where she's starting to get all this likes and stuff. And it peaks around September 19th. So basically, this whole first month right here, where she's getting all this favorability, she wasn't doing any interviews. She wasn't talking to anyone. She wasn't doing any podcasts, nothing. So then mid-September is when she started kind of doing her tour. And as you can see, basically the more she opened her mouth, the least favorable she became, to the point where when the election came around, she was unfavorable at 49%, where before it was around 46, 47. So her doing more interviews actually hurt her chances because she doesn't know what in the world she's talking about. And I think the biggest thing that hurt her was the fact that she was asked what she would do differently than Joe Biden. And she said she can't think of anything. So nobody liked Joe Biden's presidency. He was so unpopular. He was going to get destroyed by Trump if he stayed in. And you're going to sit there and say you would have done the exact same thing as him? That's stupid. So that's a big thing that hurt her. Along with the fact that she has no idea what she's talking about. And, she can't do anything unless it's scripted. She comes off very fake. She can't connect with the American people. There's a lot of reasons, but that's the biggest thing, I think. So I think, honestly, if Joe Biden waited till like September to drop out, and then this big jump would have led into the election, she probably would have had a better chance of winning because no one would have heard her talk. No one would have known anything about her. So him dropping, I think he dropped out too soon. So so all these Democrats are now getting asked about this because, this is a big deal. This is a big story. So Chuck Schumer was asked, and he basically just doesn't want to talk about it. But this was him back in last June, where he puts out this post saying, this article is a joke. They purposely left out what I told him. In my meetings with President Biden, I have found him to be in command and impressive in wielding influence to make progress on key bipartisan priorities. But you don't have to trust me. Just look at the legislative result, which is why the GOP are trying so hard to discredit him. That was June 5th. And here's him talking about him.
First one I talked to President Biden, regularly, sometimes several times in a week, or usually several times in a week. His mental acuity is great. It's fine. It's as good as it's been over the years. I've been speaking to him for 30 years since we worked on the Brady bill and the assault weapons ban when I was a young congressman. He's fine. All this right-wing propaganda that his mental acuity is declined is wrong. he's going to win the election.
You said in June of last year, in my meetings with President Biden, I found him to be in command and impressive and wielding influence to make progress on key priorities. But in that same month, Biden and family did not even recognize George Clooney at a fundraiser. Were you being straight with the American public?
Look, we're just looking forward.
We're just looking forward. He wants no part of that because he knew he got caught. He got caught in the lie, and he doesn't want to address it. And then here's someone CNN asking about it.
I really do want to ask you about something that has been breaking out of CNN. Our Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson have written a book called Original Sin, and they call it a cover-up of Biden's health and his cognition and his fitness, quite frankly, to be president of the United States. You sat next to Biden in the Oval Office February 27th, 2024, just a handful of months before the president took that debate stage. And it was later reported that you and other Democratic leaders were talking before the debate about having a plan. You and Hakeem Jeffries, Nancy Pelosi, Barack Obama. I understand you later denied that ever happened. But I am curious, I'm interested to know whether the man that you saw sitting there on that couch on that day, you were in there, you saw him up close and personal. Did you really not have any idea that he was not fit to serve a second term?
Casey, we're looking forward. We have the largest Medicaid cut in front of us. We have the whole federal
You're
government
facing all
at
of this
risk.
because you lost a presidential election. And is that not Joe Biden's responsibility for deciding to run again?
We're looking forward.
That's it?
We're looking forward. He just does not want to talk about it. This is the thing that there's people like, oh, maybe we should just move on from this. No, we should not move on from this because, one, they were caught in a huge lie, huge scandal where the president wasn't mentally there and they all tried to cover it up. That's crazy. And two, if we don't call them out on this now, what's stopping them from doing it again? They'll just do it again with the next guy, the next guy, the next guy. They'll keep doing it. If you don't learn from history, you're doomed to repeat it, and that's what is going to happen right here. So now, people like J.P. Pritzker are coming out and defending it and saying like this book is basically a complete lie. Here.
Did you know how bad things were with President Biden before the election?
When you say how bad things were, I mean, what I can say is I saw him a few times. I certainly went to the White House whenever there was an opportunity for me to make the case for something for people in my state. And I never had the experience of anything other than a guy who brought to the table a lot of good ideas about how to solve problems.
Yeah.
So to the extent people are now saying, well, we thought about whether he should have a wheelchair, which I understand is one of the things that was said. I never heard any of that.
See, this is the thing too, though, is how often is a random governor is like eye to eye with the president? Not very often. So for you to sit there and be like, oh, no, I never saw that. Well, yeah, you weren't around him. So another senator, I think she's a senator from either Wisconsin or Minnesota, Amy Klobuchar, is now coming out and saying that we would have been better if they had a primary, as she reflected on former President Biden suspending his reelection campaign. Yeah, you think? You know, a lot of Republicans were saying you should have a primary too, and you were saying, oh, we don't need one. And now all of a sudden you're saying you should have a primary. Yeah, because you lost, and now you're trying to blame every little thing possible. In reality, if the whole situation happened again, you would have done it again. So here's Jake Tapper, one of the authors, talking about this book. And I will say, it's good that this stuff's coming out, but Jake Tapper did actively participate in this cover-up too. He's not completely innocent here. He's coming out and trying to act like he's this hero for bringing all this stuff to light, but he participated in it. But let's see what he has to say here.
You have an entire White House press corps, though, following him around. And I'm just curious as to whether or not this kind of trying to hide what was happening with the president at the time had an impact on the press corps. Like, why didn't we hear some of these details from what they actually saw and were dealing with trying to get information?
Well, Alex Thompson and I were on the case, as were lots of other reporters, trying to figure out what was going on behind the scenes. But bottom line is the White House was lying, not only to the press, not only to the public, but they were lying to members of their own cabinet. They were lying to White House staffers. They were lying to Democratic members of Congress, to donors about how bad things had gotten. And in fact, Alex and I started writing this book after the election of 2024. And we spoke with more than 200 people, most of whom, almost all of whom, were Democrats, and almost all of whom wouldn't be honest with us or wouldn't be candid with us until after the election. And then after the election, we found out all of these things that when you looked at what was going on with President Biden at the time, it probably doesn't surprise you the extent to which he was deteriorating. But now we have anecdotes and facts about what was really going on behind the scenes with details that Democrats wouldn't share with us until after election.
See, that's what makes it crazy. They waited till after the election. So that just shows that if the election went their way, they would have never come out with any of this. They would have just kept it hidden for till the end of time. Like that's so shady. And now people are actually slamming Jake Tapper for this book, but most of his book is just interviews. So it's not like he's making this stuff up out of thin air. They're interviews with Biden's advisors, with other Democrats that saw this firsthand. I mean, I'm sure he's trying to get some money out or maybe some attention, but I mean, the fact of the matter is, it's not like he's just making up stuff. This is like, next few videos I'm going to show you, is just the signs were there. So this was that fundraiser where Biden didn't recognize George Clooney. Just look at Barack Obama here. Barack Obama's on the right. Look, Biden looks completely lost, doesn't know what's going on. He's just standing there, frozen. And look at Obama. Watch what Obama does. He literally grabs his arm and pulls him off stage. That's the president of the most powerful country on the planet. And someone else is grabbing his arm and pulling because he has no idea what's going on. That's crazy.
Look, the communities everywhere and at this Boys and Girls Club. By the way, I've been a gigantic supporter of Boys and Girls, just the biggest in the country. But when I was a senator, I provided a lot of money during the crime sprees were going on for Boys and Girls.
He's just rambling.
In all 50 states in the District of Columbia to seek to terminate the presidency and maybe save her life. When tens of millions of women vote this year, fastest way to restore Roe than the percentage of the men who do so. End of quote.
End of quote.
Repeat the line. This is the first use of a weapon to murder someone in Japan.
Oh my God, this is so hard to watch.
Is in fact, it's going to be. What can a kid say? You got the vaccination, or whether those aliens are here or not. We know that this virus is in fact, it's going to be, or excuse me, what could they do?
What's crazy too is this one right here, this video I'm showing you now, this town hall was like in 2020 or 2021. That was years before. Like all these stories like from this book are like from 2023, 2024. This was 5 years ago. Like the signs were there. People just chose to ignore them and chose to believe that they weren't true. And the thing is, we live in this society now where you have like the vote blue no matter who. There's Republicans that always vote Republicans no matter what. So you're just going to have people that the Democrats would literally put out a walking corpse and they would vote for him. Like, that's the world we live in. It doesn't really matter what he does, what he says. It just matters he has a D next to his name. That's all that matters to some people. And there's people that still to this day deny that Biden's mental decline exists. It's there. The dude's 82 years old. We all get old. It happens. It's going to happen to Trump one day too. Like, for you to sit there and just be in denial is just absolutely insane. Like, the signs are all there. But yeah, so basically that's the whole video. People have been mixed feelings about this book. And like I said, this really hasn't been talked about a lot. What people mostly been talking about is Trump's trip to Saudi Arabia. Like I said, every single time some kind of story comes out about Biden, the media shifts the narrative to something else. Democrats have been pressed on this a little bit, like Chuck Schumer, like Amy Klobuchar, but none of them really want to talk about it, which makes it just even shadier. Like, you lied to the American people for years about how this president was. You told us he was so mentally sharp behind closed doors. Oh, he may look tired in person, but behind closed doors, he's in command. Like, no, he's not. You lied. And that's why the country was horrible. No other countries in the world respected us. You let all these people across the border because nobody was running the country. Nobody was in command. And I think the Democrats would 100% do that again. I don't put that past them at all. But yeah, that's everything. Let me know what you guys think in the comments about this whole story. If you've heard about this, if you heard other stories about it, and I'll see you next time.